So I'm actually not going to talk at all about a Narcan training. Dion's going to do that after me. But I think a lot with what I'm going to talk about, we'll talk a lot about how we deal with preventing or working with people to prevent an overdose and how to prevent dying from an overdose. But I want to talk a little bit about our programs at Tapestry because I think it's just very relative and it does flow into the emergency sheltering, but just in a very broad way. But so I'm the director of HIV health and prevention at Tapestry, and that means that I oversee the 4 needle exchanges in Western Mass, as well as the work that we do with mainly Latino injection drug users in Springfield, and also the outreach that we do with men who have sex with men and other high-risk populations, mainly based in Hampden County. I find the story of needle exchange really interesting, especially looking from where it is now to where it was in the mid-90s. My heart is with injection drug users and advocacy around like treating people, I guess, in just a humane way. And just a brief history, around like in the mid-1990s, the state decided to allow for up to 10 legalized needle exchanges across the state, and that was because in response to the rising number of HIV cases and hepatitis C cases and the amount of increasing deaths from opioids. So at that time, 4 needle exchanges opened. One was in Northampton, and that was the only one that was successfully able to open up west of Cambridge. So between Cambridge and Northampton, there was never any. And to just think that now, like, it's just mind-boggling. Because obviously, you know, drugs have been around for quite a while, and so has injection. And to think about people not having basic access to that and just thinking of, because of that, just the horrible things that have happened. And then also to think about the amazing public health efforts that have happened since then. And then also to think about how much farther we have to go. So after 1995, no other needle exchanges were able to successfully open. And that's mainly because of how it was written in the law. It made it become a very politicized issue. And it made it be so you had to get like local political approval, but that wasn't even defined. So there are many attempts to open one up in cities like Springfield, Holyoke, Worcester, New Bedford, and other places with high HIV rates attributable to injection drug use, but they all failed because it was so politicized. And then in 2012, it was a miracle at that time. Mayor Alex Morse of Holyoke became the mayor. And he decided to take a stand for his community and say that needle exchange is needed here, and we need to speak up for injection drug users, and we need to provide this service to everybody. So him and also the local Board of Health of Holyoke approved a needle exchange. We opened that day, and nobody has been able to shut us down since. And there have been attempts. We had to go through a lawsuit. Different members of the city council filed a lawsuit against us saying that they should have had the local approval. And that lawsuit went on from 2012 to last summer, so the early spring of 2015. And then it was actually determined that city council should have local approval. So that meant that they said that we had to shut down our needle exchange services within 90 days. And we said no, and we pulled out of being a DPH Narcan pilot program, and just basically said that, in 2007 or whatever, needles became legal and it became decriminalized to carry possession of having a syringe just in 2007. And so it really is legal because you can access syringes anywhere, at any pharmacy, as long as you have an ID and you're over 18. So, and then at the same time, in July of last year, there was an update, a budget, I don't know, in the budget amendment, the language in this law changed, and it changed local approval to the Board of Health. So it defined it in black and white terms, and it lifted the cap of 10 needle exchanges. So now there can just be as many as however what Board of Health in every town approves for it. 2012, Holyoke opened. That was the 5th in the state. As of last July, I think there are about close to 10 that were approved. And then now there's close to 20 within the past 6 months because of this change. And there's a lot of science that needle exchange is successful in dramatically decreasing rates of HIV, successful in decreasing hepatitis C, and that people that come to needle exchanges are more than 5 times likely to access treatment. And basically, you know, we offer needle exchange that's at the heart, and that's kind of like where the advocacy is at, I think, and then also a lot around like Narcan, and most lately it's been like needing to provide safe spaces for drug users to use to try to help stem the crisis of people dying from overdoses. So, but within all that, there's always around comprehensive public health approaches that are provided. And, you know, they're all listed here. We do a lot of referrals to, you know, substance use treatments, such as detox, such as medication-assisted treatment. We give out a lot of Narcan. We've I don't know, we've had close to, I think, 900 reports. We've been part of this pilot program of Narcan since 2007. And we give it out for free. We educate those most at risk to witness an overdose, and we give it out anonymously as well, so people don't have to tell us who they are or give us any identifying information. And from the thousands, all the kits that we've given out, we've had about 900 people come back to us and say that they've used it to reverse a potentially fatal overdose. And drug users themselves are up to 10 times more likely to witness an overdose when compared to a first responder. And so, like, our program, you know, we work directly with active drug users, and our goal is, and believe, is that, you know, in providing different kinds of empowerment models and just really meeting people where they're at as an individual can be really successful in promoting just healthy behavior change, really. This is just I just wanted to show a picture of kind of what we do. And in the upper left corner, that's a photo of our exchange room at our Northampton site. On the right is a disposal box. People can drop off their loose syringes in there. And we also provide sharps containers that are shown in that photo, free of charge. We're also a disposal site for everybody, so anybody can come to us and safely dispose of their syringes, such as diabetics and others. And then we also provide stuff, because it takes a lot of materials or whatever to prepare a heroin shot and inject it in a safe way to try to completely eliminate the chance of, especially hepatitis C. Hepatitis C is very, very contagious. It can live on surfaces for, I don't even know. I feel like the length of time gets longer. I want to say up to 30 days, but feel free to disagree. Whereas HIV dies when it hits air. But again, hepatitis C lives on surfaces. So when someone's preparing a shot, they need, you know, I guess you see images of spoons or a cooker. And when within the process of, even if you're not sharing the needle, just the process of the needle and whatever, a lot of cross-contamination can occur from one user to the other. And hepatitis C is often transmitted that way. So it's really important that we provide sterile equipment. And just in the lower left corner, that's an old counselor, Stephen. He's just showing our paperwork. And you know, every time someone comes in, we do a lot of documentation of like the services we provide, and then we also do a lot of documentation of behavior risk and risk change. But everything we do when it comes to needle exchange is anonymous, because it's incredibly hard to access this population. About 40%, 30 to 40% of the people we see are under the age of 35. A lot of the people we see have never accessed any form of care, any form of treatment. And a lot of people on a daily basis just are kind of up against a lot of you know, and I mean, you guys all know, like roadblocks of stigma and shame, and just and we really want to provide a safe space for people to come in and be completely honest with us about whatever's going on. And our model basically centers on harm reduction. And I just wanted to talk about this model a bit and try to just break it down a little bit. Because this is kind of our whole approach centers around harm reduction. And the one thing I want to say is, you know, I've been working at Tapestry for almost 9 years now, and I really try to always like check myself about my beliefs, because as a human, I just will have biases always. And I really always like, and I tell my staff this and just really be like, it's okay to be wrong, you know, like everybody is wrong. Like we all have biases, you know, we all do stuff wrong, like that's fine. Like I think it's, you know, I try to promote an environment to just pay attention to when something's wrong and try to learn from it and move forward. And a lot of that does come from like stereotypes that we can get about somebody walking through the door. So, you know, harm reduction accepts that risky behaviors will occur no matter what. That's just the way it is. Like, you know, that's just reality. And we try to reduce the negative consequences of risky behaviors. We value the process over the outcome. So, you know, we have a lot of goals. We have goals to get people into treatment. We have goals to get people into care and so on and so forth. But we don't emphasize success on the goals. We emphasize success on the positive contact that we're having with the individuals and the process of working with them. Because, you know, like as a counselor, that one person that I got into treatment, like I would love to be like, yeah, like I got the credit, or not the credit, you know, but like, yeah, man, I got that person in treatment, I rock, but like, how many other people are involved in that process, including that person? You know, I might have just been that lucky like 50th or 100th person. And so for the many, many other people where we talk about whatever and then they leave, we try, you know, it's like just, I try to remember this is a process. I wish it was linear. I wish it was just like starting drugs and then stopping and an endpoint, but it's more of a cyclical process. And it's important, I think, to realize that when interacting with people that are at times really hard to deal with. So we also value the knowledge and everything from the clients that we work with, and we try to use that within how we continue to develop our program. I have learned most of just what I know today from the clients that I work with. It's you know, like it's pretty amazing sitting down with somebody, listening to their story, and just listening to how on a day-to-day basis, you know, they like, you know, what the hustle's like, how they take care of themselves, like just what the real I don't know, it's just like such a big story. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have the same experience being a nurse. But it's pretty amazing. But again, it's like really, I think this all kind of stems around, it's like, gotta check myself around my beliefs. And, you know, it's just in around just being non-judgmental. So just some examples of harm reduction: seatbelts, helmets, looking both ways before crossing the street, a designated driver, which I brought up a few times because I've found the designated driver thought really interesting around the Narcan discussion. Because like I've heard just in different conversations about people being like, you know, if there's Narcan there, it's going to encourage drug use, and like people are going to use because they know it's there and they're not afraid to die, and they'll use with the intention to overdose. And I've heard of these Narcan parties where people sit around and like they'll take turns using, and somebody will watch them and whatever. And like I've heard that term Narcan party quite a few times, and I'm like, whoa, like that is really healthy behavior. Like awesome that these Narcan parties are happening, because that's something that, and especially with fentanyl right now, that's something that we highly encourage. We're like, you know, it's hard, but use with other people if possible. Take care of each other. because you need to watch out for each other. And just thinking of like the conversation around emergency preparedness and all the barriers that can come up when thinking about how to, provide access to alcohol or drugs and whatever, and then all that around. Like I think about it just made me think about how useful it is to have peers to be able to help each other out in those situations, who can get around those roadblocks and really just focus on helping with whatever is going on. I kind of compare needle exchange to how I feel like the conversation around condoms was even now, I guess, abortion and just harm reduction. So just in action, I think of all this as checking myself. And it's really I really like the phrase any positive change, because it really is all about any positive change. And it really is emphasizing participants' strength and believing or working with the people in knowing that they actually can make decisions over their health, even as being a drug user. Harm reduction is part of a treatment continuum. For many, drug use is not an either or. Unfortunately, it's just, again, I wish it was a linear process and that it could just be stop using and, go on and live forward. But it is often a matter of degree for a lot of people. And this, I don't know, I'm always thinking about this around just around what does it mean to use drugs and what does it mean to be a drug user? And I say drug user because, well, I think addict is a very stigmatizing word, and I like the term user because I think that it's more encompassing and it tries to break down that divide between what people think is the typical heroin junkie and the person that likes to have a glass of wine with dinner every night. As Ruth talked about how many people have an addiction, and most people who use drugs, alcohol including, do not have an addiction. And oftentimes, people in society like to do stuff and don't, it's just not talked about. But it's basically trying to break down that barrier. So, any questions so far? Okay. Harm associated with not practicing harm reduction. We work with people every day. I feel like every single person I've worked with and talked to that come into the needle exchange, just face this. And it's not even a black and white thing of someone doing something that you can obviously see as wrong. It's the culture. It's the belief about who are these people and who they are and what they do and the bad and just kind of that it's that stigma, it's that shame, and it permeates every part of life. And I feel like this isn't too far off when I relate to drug users in this. I'm just talking about basic human rights. I think with this administration, rights around race and gender have been coming up around a lot, and really just that conversation and that dialogue has just been so great, I think, and really boiling it down to we need to look at people, drug users included, as an individual and try not to stereotype any group of people. A lot of people, this stuff also greatly increases chances of dying from an overdose. I really believe, and I know that there's studies around this, that if shifting cultural change, and so that could mean being, working in the emergency room and someone coming in because whether they, have an abscess or if they're coming in from an overdose or if they're coming in just whatever related to drugs, how am I engaging with that person? And oftentimes, most often, even when I engage in my public health role, or if I was in any other wherever, when I do engage, that person could definitely be ready to stop using in that moment, but most likely they're not, because again, it is the process. So how am I engaging with that person without stigmatizing and alienating people? It's a tough one. But just some things I found interesting is just the thought of what is your attitude towards substance use and abuse, and what is your attitude towards like the chronic user as opposed to younger people. And I have to say, like, within, the media and like around like the opioid epidemic and all the attention being paid to it it's been incredible to see how much progress has been made in the past few years, although it's terrible because of why there's so much progress is because there's so much death. But I think it's really important to recognize that overdose and addiction has been around for centuries. And when thinking about like the user, I often hear a lot, like just in media, in terms that it's like, now it's not your typical user. It's not that like back alley junkie. It's like people that basically just are younger, rural, grew up in good homes, whatever. And the definition of what a user is now and who we should hope, a lot of times it still does fall into that stigma and that shame, because it's just, like, are we paying attention to these people because more people who are getting onto opioids look more like the people in power? And I always also try to like check my judgment and just like about like my own power and society. Also the attitude towards alcohol versus other drugs, and the recognizing that heroin, alcohol, nicotine, sugar, whatever, as like Ruth talked about, is they're all really connected, and I think that there's a way that we can all connect about this. So harm reduction messaging. At our needle exchange about a year or two ago, we put up a board that is for participants by participants to start sharing information about the heroin that's being used on the street. So on the board, there will be names of the current bags that whoever is using, and then there will be a description of it. And lately, a lot of the description is that lots of overdoses have happened from this one. This one has, like, I think that there's fentanyl in this one, and it's all from drug users' perception. But we really believe that, and also just not, we try to, like, when talking about it, it's like, all right, this stuff was strong. Like, what do you mean strong? How did it make you feel? Did it make you feel tingly? Like, how did the drug cook down? And whatever, like getting down to the root to try to, because denying the information to people for fear of going to look for the strong stuff puts people at risk for an overdose, because that lessens the chances that they know what they're doing. And people that are using, they already know where to get the strong stuff. And I think that, there's a lot of conversation all the time. It's like, yeah, you tell somebody where the bags are, where people are dying from, and like people will like flock to the drug. But I see it as like you get a tolerance off of heroin, and it's really tough and hard to deal with a heroin addiction every day. And it is really good for its supply, or what is it called, like strength, and the amount of money that you spend. And when you know you only have to spend $5 instead of $15 to get high, like that's just how the market works. Words like bad batch are misleading, because what does a bad batch mean? And I think this is important. Even like it was cool to see the Gazette and just like the most recent outbreak of overdoses that happened around here, and putting it out in the paper and letting people know. I thought that was great. I would have liked to see the name of the bag in the article, and it would have been cool to like see like details about if anything was reported. I guess from a reporter it'd be hard to get this, but like why were people overdosing was there anything different about the drug? Did they see anything on the scene? And just saying what kind of brand it is and just putting the information out there, naming it for what it is and getting away from like summarizing terms can be really helpful. This is just examples of stuff at our sites that we use to teach people. So we, hierarchy of safety around drug use. And I have a feeling a lot of you have seen a lot of really rough stuff, especially, just working with injection drug users. And we see a lot of that stuff all the time too. And we'll see people coming in for their first time into the exchange and they're young and just learning their story. They've been injecting for less than a year and they're already injecting in their neck. And people just having these bad abscesses coming in. And when I talk to them, it's like a lot of it is root because it's like people that are educating each other around them. And there's not a lot of opportunities for a lot of social networks, especially depending on like the age and the experience, to get accurate information from other people. So we do a lot of education around how to safely inject, including rotating veins and the importance of using a new syringe every time you inject, if at all possible. The big thing has been fentanyl now, and it's just going to get worse, but I find that visual images can be really effective as just a piece of education. And we've been doing this also a lot around our Narcan education, because fentanyl with overdoses, fentanyl is much stronger acting and shorter lasting. So a lot of people that are injecting what they think is heroin but is actually fentanyl are falling into an overdose right away. And a lot of people have described it like injecting and then they can feel their gasp of breath and then they can just feel themselves fall out. And then a lot of people are even starting to see that from a fentanyl overdose, they have like wooden chest syndrome where they freeze up. I guess that can happen in anesthesia too sometime, but that means that it's really tough to do rescue breathing. And so we've been saying, like, if you do witness an overdose, the first thing is give the Narcan right away. It needs to get in there right away because of how fentanyl is acting so strong, and calling 911. We used to emphasize, we always say call 911. We always talk about that. And we used to say call 911 first and then the Narcan. And now we're finding it much more important to say use the Narcan, then call 911, and do rescue breathing. I really like visual graphics because there's a lot of like little, it's habits, but it's habits that are learned from other people that can increase chances of things like an abscess, such as keep it in your mouth. Or I find a lot of people will, like, after they prepare a shot, they'll lick their needle and before injecting, and not thinking about like bacteria, whatever. And so it's just those, I guess, little things about teaching people how to be safe. And so I just have this one slide. I did want to talk about safer disposal. And I thought the picture of the staff member was really good. He's modeling good behavior or good whatever. He's in Springfield. And we have red sharps containers, and it's on the ground. He has a gloved hand, which is cool, but the most important thing is he has tongs, and he's not holding the red container. He's picking up whatever syringe, puts the container on the ground, takes the tong, takes the needle, and puts it in. I know he's wearing closed-toed shoes and boots that will help in case he steps on anything. In outreach environments, there's a lot of emphasis around needles and the dangers of coming across syringes and the totally legit, but like I'm also like, well, what about all the glass and like the other stuff and because I don't know, like a lot of cities won't pick up discarded syringes. because they don't want the liability of it. And that makes me think, like, what do you do with glass? What do you do with like nails that you find? And you know, it's important to be aware, but it's also important just to know that like it won't come out and bite you. With staff, we always do a lot of training around safer disposal. We always say, like, when somebody comes in, we never touch the needles that are coming in. People have to go and dispose of them. We have protocols, lots of tongs around if there's ever a discarded needle wherever to pick up. We do a lot of blood draws because we test for HIV and hepatitis C, and all staff are trained to do blood draws, and so there's a lot of education around basically being aware of your environment and the action as you're performing this. And we have sharps containers everywhere, and so we also in Holyoke we help to host community cleanups every once in a while. We're taking part in the Mayor Morse's cleanup in a couple weeks. But we go out with people, and you know, there will be a staff member in every group to kind of lead the way with the needles. But you know, we teach people the proper disposal with putting the sharps in the ground, taking the tongs, never touching it. Walking in alleyways, you really have to be aware of what you're walking on and where you are, and making sure you're wearing the right footwear. All of our staff also have to wear long pants whenever they go out on outreach. And it's been a really great experience doing that with the community. So that's my presentation. And does anybody have any questions or anything? Is there anything that I didn't talk about that I should have?
Good.